This is the 217 Recovery Podcast with Corey Winfield.
Corey Winfield. You have a rich person's name. Like, you should be a billionaire with the name Winfield. Anyway, call me back, bro.
December 17th, 2020. It's 217 Recovery Podcast. My name is Corey Winfield, and how does he know I'm not a billionaire already? Well, I mean, because I'm not, but... Joining me on the phone, a very special guest. She's the founder and president of Sanford House. On the phone right now is Ray Green. Ray, how are you today?
I'm great, Corey, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you.
I know. I've heard so much about Sanford House, I decided I'm going to reach out.
Well, I'm so happy you did, because I want you to know more. So let's talk about Sanford. I'm excited to tell you more.
Yeah, and we were just kind of chatting before we started the podcast, and we were kind of talking about the first steps of actually getting into treatment. First, people who don't know, sometimes it can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. And you kind of have to go into it with the mindset of, let's get some help. And a lot of times when the person who needs the help, they're withdrawing, they're freaking out, they're scared, they're nervous, so those I think are very common things. At least they were with me. So don't
Sure.
look at that and think of somebody, well, he doesn't really want it. He wanted it yesterday, but doesn't want it today. Just stay patient, and, Googling it can be interesting. How would you recommend, obviously, you have a website, so you would probably say, well, SanfordHouseGR.com would be a good way to go.
Yes, it would. And and you've hit on a lot of layers of things that I would love to touch on as well. Number one, making that call is probably one of the most courageous things someone can do, whether it's the person who's struggling or their family or loved one or friend who's trying to help them. And you can't go wrong by making the call. When you call the admissions team at Sanford, we call them our admissions counselors, and they are knowledgeable, but also serve as that first point of contact in a comforting and welcoming way, because we don't want an experience being a call line where you feel like you're just in a queue waiting to get to a place that they decide to plunk you. We want to make sure that Sanford House is appropriate, that you're comfortable, and if it's not, then our admissions team is skilled at saying, you know what, this might be the resource for you, or maybe you should call here. So it can't hurt, and I would encourage anybody, just pick up the phone and make the calls and do your homework. On every call you make, you're going to get a couple names, and you just keep going up that tree to find what's right for you and what feels good, because you've got to be comfortable with where you're going. But that's where our team is really skilled, is when people call in, we can talk to the mom who's got challenges or the person who's struggling, and we want to capture them at that moment of readiness, because the nature of this disease is that moment will pass. And there's going to have to be another consequence or another propelling factor to prompt another call. So, time is of the essence with this disease.
It is.
I had other thoughts, but go ahead and you ask me what you want to ask me, Corey, and I'll just keep going.
All right. Well, for me, when I was in radio and I was going to go to treatment the first time, I didn't want anybody to know. It was very secretive. Well, I hope the times have changed. At least they have for me in my personal life, where I let everybody know I'm in recovery. I mean, being in recovery is a great thing. It's a statement. I changed my life for the better. I stopped using drugs. Who should be ashamed of that?
That's
but for
correct. Nobody should be.
No. But for some people,
nobody should be ashamed of it. That's right.
They still have that fear, and they also have the fear of, like, I worked for iHeartMedia, which was a great company at that time, and they said, take as much time as you need, and they meant it, but other people, that's one other thing too, is their job. They're like, oh, but I can't take it. I can't take a month off. I can't take 2 weeks off. What do you tell people when they say that?
Well, a couple of things. One is that if someone's job is in jeopardy, we're going to look at what is the right level of treatment for them. Maybe they're not at the point where they need an acute episode of care. So we can say, well, let's start out with, when we call this our real life recovery, where people can enter into through, we say, the system through different levels of care. So we're going to look at if that job is a situation that's imperative, is there somewhere else we can start? Now, oftentimes, not being able to leave work or not being able to take away from their job can simply be, quote unquote, an excuse for someone who is afraid of taking that time. So you really have to assess what is behind I can't leave, my job or my work. So when you're so chronically progressed in the disease that you're going to lose your job anyway, in all likelihood, then that says, you know what, this treatment is something that is essential and critical, and you've got to come in, and it's as if someone were going into a hospital for a knee replacement, right? You're going to have to go in and do that work. But we really try to peel through those layers and say, if someone can keep their job and keep working and it hasn't been impacted yet, is there another way that we can get them the supports they need? So that's one part of the answer. Now let's talk about the story and the storytelling. Part of what we do in treatment is talk about people's stories, because only when you really talk about it and you tell that story do you start taking, the fear and the trauma and all of those underlying things, the power away from that. However, I always tell our clients, and I'm also an addictions counselor, and so just I say that by way of credibility. If someone says, what does she know? I have gone to school and I have worked with people. So one of the things I tell them is that you're going to know when you're ready to tell your story. And when you first get sober, that may not be the time you're ready to talk about it, because you're still struggling with, the why did this happen, and, where do I need to go from here? And, maybe your self worth and your self-compassion are still at a low. So telling your story doesn't necessarily feel like the right thing to do yet. Or maybe it is because people at work are going to be judgmental and it's going to impact it. So that might be, it is your story. So you want to tell it or not tell it, appropriate to what your situation is. But what I see is that as people get farther along in the recovery journey, that's when they start getting more comfortable talking and sharing about that story. And when I go and speak and provide educational presentations, if I take someone, I am not myself in recovery from a psychoactive substance, but I have experiences and family experiences and professional experiences. But if I take someone along who is in recovery, that's when the hands in the group go up and people get talking about it. I have a sister, I have a mother, and so that comfort level there at just having someone who is sharing their story, like you are, Corey, is huge.
Yeah, and the fact that I personally had to just throw it out there for the world. And I later learned that there was like three types of people. There's the people that just blast it all over. There's the people that, I don't want to talk about it at all. And then there's the people that are just like, yeah, if someone brings it up, I'll say something maybe, but yeah, not really too curious about letting everybody know. But for me, that was one of the things that I think really helped. But everybody's different. Everybody's different, but there's clinical value in having a story in your mind. And I'll tell you why. When someone is sitting at a work party, and then a pint of beer or a pitcher of beer is ordered, and here the glass is put in front of someone, if you don't have a story in your mind of how you're going to handle it, that's when you're vulnerable. That's when that little voice can come through and you say you should do this just to cover this up from the work people. Where what we try to do as a treatment facility is clinically back up the idea of what is in your mind. Maybe it is, you know what, I'm on meds right now. I'm going to skip that beer, and because someone isn't ready to talk about it. Or what's your answer to that? Is, you know what, I gave that up a while back, and this, so somebody can say it, and
and make other people comfortable. Like, people have only, so much of a limit in their life for how much alcohol, and I hit mine, so some people are more comfortable with that, making others comfortable. Some people aren't comfortable talking about it. One of the favorite groups that I do, I call it improv, and I have in a bag, little pieces of paper that set out scenarios that someone finds themselves in, and they, pull this improv scenario out. How would you respond? How would you answer it? Because when they leave the cocoon of treatment, you want someone prepared on how to approach that subject at their comfort level. What do they want to share?
That's wise, and that sounds like a lot of fun too.
It is fun. One thing about treatment is if it's boring, people are going to start yawning and falling asleep. And so one of our tenets is that we want treatment to be engaging, interactive. I mean, some of it is education about the disease, which is to me one of the most interesting things. That's my passion, is the neuroscience behind it. But we try to change up the groups and the different modes of communication, all evidence-based, because we comply with insurance companies and what they like. But it's really exciting to get creative because you're dealing with people's minds. And so you want to make it engaging and inspiring and hopeful.
Yeah, and that was like my thing in recovery. Like I wanted to have fun. And I had been at the treatment 15 times. And so the last time I went in, I was actually forced to go there, and I had to wait and be there 90 days. So I thought, you know what, I might as well just figure this out, sit down and just let it come to me. I couldn't leave early this time.
And what did you do, Corey, that made it fun?
Oh, we played games.
I'm interested to hear. Yeah.
We played games. The guys in 217 with me, we would come up with different words that, it was a game that I used to play on the radio with coworkers. And I'd give them something to say if they were, doing an interview or, coming in to talk about some stuff on my show. Hey, you got to say this, hamburger meat or whatever. And so we started working those in, and we gave some really crazy words to each other. And it was so much fun, but it was also scary because I had to say, just for example, I kind of told you about this earlier, like my mom's panties. Like I had to say that one time. And it was during parent relationships too. So I was talking about my father and the relationship that I don't have with him. And so it was a lot easier actually for me to get that off my chest with something that is real personal to me while I'm thinking about how am I going to work my mom's panties into this, and then just even that coming out of my mouth right now is just insane that I'm saying my mom's panties. Now my mom's listening going, oh, Jesus,
and then
Corey.
It would break down So, yeah, let me talk about that for a minute. And I love how you integrated, breaking that ice during when you're sharing at the most emotional level. I mean, you're walking through the emotional trenches of your mind, and that is, that's a tough, courageous thing to do. But to add that element of laughter, and what that does is create a sense of community, which is so urgent when healing from this disease. It doesn't heal in isolation. But let me go back to that stigma. We're bouncing a little bit around right now like a ping pong ball, but we're getting some good topics here. One of the things that is always remarkable to me is that if I tell someone what I do, I own a treatment center, drug rehab, you can use all the words substance use disorder, treatment, politically correct. And it's the fastest way to close a conversation because people are immediately uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But if I talk about where we do our treatment, we do it in historic homes located in the Heritage Hill District of Grand Rapids. And Sanford is the name of our early settler who built the women's facility. It was built in 1847, pre-Civil War, and the building itself has things that are interesting and historical to talk about, and that makes people comfortable. Oh, and then what do you do there? And people start talking. So sometimes it's just a matter of finding your entree, as you did with humor or with certain words, and sometimes our setting is just that. It's an entree into the conversation. And one of the things that I learned, maybe the most poignant lesson during the process of opening our treatment centers was when we went through the zoning process to get a special land use. And, of course, you have to go door to door and tell people what you're doing. And we're set in a residential setting, and then you go to the zoning committee. And we met with a huge amount of opposition. And I was really stunned by that, because I thought, here we